Take it off, the family lawyer said quietly, staring at the sapphire ring on the maid's hand. The silver tray almost slipped from Elena Brooks's fingers. Around her, crystal wine glasses froze halfway to lips. Candlelight trembled across the blue stone. Nobody looked at her face. Nobody looked at the black apron tied around her waist. They looked at the ring. And when Adrian Moretti finally rose from the head of the room, the most feared man in Manhattan did not ask who she was. He asked one question. Where did you get that? 3 hours earlier, Elena had been polishing silver in a service corridor most guests would never know existed. The Moretti estate had two worlds. One lived beneath chandeliers and oil paintings. The other moved through back hallways carrying trays, folding napkins, and making sure rich people never saw the machinery that served them. Elena belonged to the second world. She always had. At 28, she knew how to become invisible better than most people knew how to introduce themselves. Foster homes taught you that. So did growing up wearing other people's clothes, sleeping in rooms that were never yours, and learning that anything you loved could disappear without warning. The sapphire ring was the only thing that never had. Her mother had left it behind in a dented silver music box along with 3 instructions. Never sell it. Never remove it. Never tell anyone the name written inside. Elena had followed those rules for 12 years. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Serve drinks. Avoid attention. Go home. But the ring had felt unusually tight that morning, and without thinking, she had moved it from a chain around her neck back onto her finger. Now she stood in the center of the estate's annual memorial dinner for Isabella Moretti, carrying a tray of red wine while portraits of a dead woman watched from every wall. The guests arrived dressed in black silk and old money. Politicians, judges, family friends, men who spoke softly because they never needed to raise their voices. Elena moved among them like furniture, present, unnoticed, until she reached the memorial table. A white-haired woman studying Isabella's portrait suddenly grabbed Elena's wrist. Hard. The tray rattled. Wine splashed against crystal. "Where did you get that ring?" the woman whispered. The conversation nearest them stopped. Then another. Then another. Silence spread through the room faster than shouting ever could. Elena felt every eye turn toward her. "It belonged to my mother," she said carefully. A mistake. She knew it the second the words left her mouth. Across the room, Lawrence Voss straightened from his conversation with a senator. He did not hurry. Men like Lawrence never hurried. They expected the world to wait. He approached with calm concern painted across his face. "I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation," he said. The room relaxed slightly. Then he added, "Although Isabella's ring was reported missing 15 years ago, the pressure changed instantly. Nobody accused Elena. That was the genius of it. Nobody had to. She could feel judgment settling over her shoulders anyway." Adrian Moretti finally stepped forward. 6'3", dark suit, stillness sharp enough to cut skin. He looked at the ring, then at Elena, then back at the ring. "Your mother gave you that?" he asked. "Yes." "What was her name?"
Elena swallowed.
The answer had never mattered before. Not until this moment. Clara Brooks. For the first time, something shifted in Adrian's expression. Not belief. Not recognition. Something colder. Something calculating. Lawrence's face remained perfectly composed. Except for one detail. When Elena tightened her grip on the tray, the sapphire caught the candlelight and revealed a tiny scratch near the setting. A scratch only visible from inches away. Lawrence saw it. And for a fraction of a second, the color drained from his face. Lawrence recovered so quickly that anyone who blinked would have missed it. One moment the color had drained from his face. The next, he was smoothing the front of his charcoal suit and offering the room a patient smile. "Miss Brooks," he said, his voice warm enough to sound kind. "Perhaps we should clear up this misunderstanding privately." The word misunderstanding settled over the room like a blanket thrown across a body. Not an accusation. Not yet. Elena felt every eye on her anyway. The silver tray had become heavy in her hands. "My mother gave me the ring," she said again. Then I'm sure you won't mind answering a few questions. Lawrence extended one hand. And the music box. Silence followed. Adrian Moretti had not moved. He stood near the memorial portrait, one hand resting against the back of a chair, watching. Not defending her. Not condemning her. Watching. Elena slowly set the tray down. No, the room tightened. Lawrence blinked. No. The ring belonged to my mother. The music box belongs to me. A few guests exchanged looks. Someone quietly cleared a throat. Lawrence's smile remained exactly where it was. Of course. And yet a family heirloom disappeared the same year your mother somehow acquired it. You can understand why people may have questions. He never called her a thief. That was what made it worse. 20 minutes later, Elena found herself standing in a small sitting room off the main hall while rain tapped softly against tall windows. The music box sat on a polished table between her and Lawrence. Adrian remained near the doorway. 2 bodyguards stood outside. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody needed to. Lawrence opened a slim leather folder. Your mother passed away 4 years ago?
Elena nodded.
And before that? She cleaned houses. For whom? Whoever would hire her. Lawrence made a note. Did she ever mention Isabella Moretti? No, that part was true. Her mother had never spoken the name. Only stories. A woman who played piano when she was afraid. A woman who hid letters where no one thought to look. A woman who drank coffee after midnight because sleep brought bad dreams. Lawrence studied her face. Interesting. Then he opened another document. Because according to this report, Isabella's ring vanished on October 17th, 15 years ago. He slid the paper across the table. Elena looked down. A missing property report. Official. Signed. Dated. Neat black ink. Everything looked normal until her eyes stopped on the timestamp. 11:42 p.m. Her stomach tightened. Something wrong? Lawrence asked. Elena glanced up. Maybe nothing. Adrian's eyes lifted slightly. Say it. It was the first thing he had said in several minutes. Elena looked back at the paper. My mother always worked night shifts. She wrote everything down. Lawrence's smile faded a fraction. And she kept old receipts in the music box. Elena reached inside the worn silver box before anyone could stop her. Folded papers. Yellowed edges. Utility bills. Grocery receipts. A coffee receipt. Her fingers froze. Coffee Haven. October 17th. 15 years ago. 2 large coffees purchased at 11:47 p.m. 5 minutes after the ring had supposedly already been reported missing. That's impossible, Lawrence said quietly. Nobody had asked him. The room became very still. Elena unfolded the receipt completely. On the back, written in faded blue ink she recognized instantly as her mother's handwriting, were 4 words. Not a shopping note. Not a reminder. Just 4 words that made Adrian step closer to the table. She isn't safe here. The words sat on the table between them. She isn't safe here. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Rain whispered against the windows. Somewhere deeper in the mansion, a grandfather clock marked another quarter hour. Elena stared at the faded blue handwriting. She had seen those letters 1,000 times on grocery lists, utility bills, birthday cards signed by a woman who never talked much about her past. Seeing the same handwriting attached to a warning felt different. It felt like opening a door that had been locked her entire life. A frightened woman writes many things, Lawrence said at last. His tone was gentle, reasonable, especially if she struggled financially. Elena looked up. There it was. Not an attack. A reduction. Take the poor woman. Take the maid. Make them emotional. Make them unreliable. My mother didn't write things she didn't mean, Elena said quietly. Lawrence gave a sympathetic smile that somehow felt worse than anger. I'm sure you believe that. Adrian remained standing near the table, motionless. His gaze never left the receipt. 5 minutes, he said. Lawrence turned slightly. Excuse me? The report says the ring was reported missing at 11:42 p.m. Adrian's voice was calm. The receipt was printed at 11:47. Clocks differ. The answer came too quickly. Adrian noticed. Elena noticed too. Tiny thing. The kind of thing most people ignored. Lawrence had not looked at the receipt before answering. He already knew what defense he wanted. Maybe, Adrian said. Nothing in his face changed. But he reached for the report himself instead of letting Lawrence hold it. That small movement tightened something in the room. Elena glanced down at the remaining papers inside the music box. Old receipts, utility statements, a hospital invoice, yellowed envelopes. Then something caught her eye. A photograph tucked beneath the false velvet lining. She pulled it free. Lawrence's jaw tightened for less than a second. There and gone. What is it? Adrian asked. Elena studied the picture. It showed a piano room, sunlight through tall windows, fresh flowers on a black grand piano, 2 women standing near the bench. One was her mother, much younger. The other had to be Isabella, elegant, smiling, alive. My mother kept this hidden, Elena said. Lawrence extended his hand. May I? She hesitated, then passed it over. He examined it for barely a second. Interesting. His voice remained smooth.
Unfortunately, photographs prove friendship.
Not ownership. He handed it back. Elena almost nodded, almost accepted that. Then she froze. Her eyes returned to the image. Not the women. The room behind them. The piano bench. Wait. Adrian looked at her. What? Elena stepped closer to the lamp. Her pulse quickened. The room is wrong. Lawrence laughed softly. The room is wrong? The bench. She pointed. It's facing the window. And? Lawrence asked. Nothing. Furniture moves. But Adrian had gone still again. Elena looked between them. My mother used to tell a story about a woman who hid in a piano room whenever she was scared. Lawrence folded his arms. Stories. Elena ignored him. She always said the woman kept the bench turned toward the door. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. Why?
Elena swallowed.
Because she wanted to see who was coming before they entered. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Different this time. Adrian looked at the photograph. Then at the memorial portrait visible through the open doorway. Then back to the photograph. The official biography says Isabella loved that room, he said quietly. Your mother described someone hiding in it. Lawrence immediately stepped forward. Adrian, surely we're not building family history around bedtime stories. The words sounded reasonable, almost convincing, except this time when Lawrence smiled. He never once looked at the photograph in Elena's hands. He looked only at Adrian, and that was when Elena noticed something else. In the lower corner of the picture, barely visible beside the piano leg, was a small brass key card with the Moretti crest engraved on it and a handwritten date. October 17th. October 17th. Elena stared at the handwritten date until the numbers seemed to blur. The photograph trembled slightly between her fingers. Not because she was afraid, because suddenly every object in the room felt heavier than it had 5 minutes ago. The key card in the picture, the receipt, the warning on the back. They were beginning to point in the same direction. Lawrence stepped forward first. An old photograph can be interpreted many ways. His tone remained calm, professional, the voice of a man accustomed to ending conversations before they became dangerous. I think we're losing perspective. Adrian extended his hand. The photo. Lawrence hesitated. Only for a second. Then Elena passed it directly to Adrian instead. Another tiny thing. Another breach of the order everyone seemed to expect. They moved into a private dining room overlooking the estate gardens. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the rain outside. A 20-foot walnut table stretched through the center of the room beneath a crystal chandelier worth more than Elena's apartment building. She suddenly became aware of her black apron, her sensible shoes, the small stain near her cuff from carrying red wine earlier. Across from her sat board members from the family foundation, the estate manager, and Adrian's aunt, Vivian Moretti. Nobody was openly hostile. That somehow made it worse. Miss Brooks, Vivian said with a sympathetic smile. You seem like a lovely young woman, but grief can create attachments. Sometimes people want to feel connected to important stories. Elena knew what she meant. Poor girls liked fairy tales. Lawrence slid a document across the polished table. To avoid misunderstandings, we've prepared a simple statement. It says you inherited the ring in good faith and have no knowledge of its origin. Sign it and everyone can move forward. The paper stopped in front of her. The room grew quiet. Elena read every line. Her pulse slowed instead of quickened. There it was. One sentence near the bottom. She knowingly possesses no additional materials connected to Isabella Moretti. Lawrence watched her with patient eyes. Merely a formality. No, the word landed softly. The room stiffened. No. Vivian repeated. Elena placed the paper back on the table. The statement isn't true. Lawrence folded his hands. Which part? I do have additional materials. She rested her palm on the silver music box. And you already know that. Nobody spoke. The chandelier hummed faintly overhead. Adrian had not interrupted once. He simply watched. Elena noticed something then. Every time the music box changed hands, Lawrence's gaze followed it. Not the ring. Not the photograph. The box. Miss Brooks, the estate manager said carefully. Perhaps you're overwhelmed. Maybe.
Elena nodded.
Then why does nobody want me to open it? The question settled into the center of the table. Lawrence smiled. Because we're trying to protect you from embarrassing assumptions. About me? Elena asked. Or about what's inside? For the first time, Vivian looked uncomfortable. Lawrence reached for a glass of water. A small movement. Ordinary. Except his sleeve pulled back just enough to reveal a faint ink mark on his wrist. Adrian's eyes flickered downward. Once. Then back up. Open it, he said. The room went still. Lawrence lowered the glass. Adrian, with respect, we're giving credibility to coincidence. Adrian never looked at him. Open it. Elena lifted the music box onto the table. The latch clicked. The old mechanism groaned softly. Everyone leaned forward. Everyone except Lawrence. He already seemed to know what should have been inside. And that was the mistake. Because before the lid fully opened, Adrian quietly asked a question that made the lawyer's expression tighten for the first time all night. How did you know there wasn't another photograph in there? The question hung in the room like smoke. Nobody answered it. Not immediately. The music box sat open beneath the chandelier, its tarnished silver catching fragments of light. Lawrence's face remained composed, but something had changed around his eyes. Not panic. Calculation. The look of a man rearranging a story before anyone realized it needed rearranging. I assumed, he said at last, that if Miss Brooks possessed one photograph, she might possess others. Adrian did not respond. Silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. Long enough for everyone at the table to become aware of it. Long enough to feel it. Elena had noticed something about powerful people. Most of them feared silence more than accusations. Accusations could be answered. Silence left room for thought. And thought was dangerous. She reached deeper into the music box. There is something else. Every head turned toward her. Lawrence's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Elena carefully removed a folded piece of paper trapped beneath the velvet lining. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a photograph. It was a receipt. Old. Fragile. The edges had yellowed. A crease ran through the center where it had been folded for years. Another receipt? Vivian asked. Her voice carried polite disappointment. Perhaps your mother simply saved everything. She did, Elena said. But not in hidden compartments. That landed differently. Adrian extended his hand. Elena gave him the receipt. He unfolded it slowly. A jewelry restoration shop in Brooklyn. October 15th. 2 days before Isabella died. The amount charged was $78.50. Not enough to attract attention. Not enough to seem important. Until Adrian reached the bottom. His eyes stopped moving. The room became very quiet. What is it? Vivian asked. Adrian slid the receipt across the table without speaking. Lawrence picked it up. Elena watched the color drain from his face a second time that night. The work order listed a specific request. Sapphire ring. Interior engraving added per customer. Instruction. That proves nothing, Lawrence said almost immediately. Too quickly. People engrave jewelry all the time. Adrian finally spoke. Read it. Lawrence didn't. Elena realized he was avoiding the final line. Adrian took the receipt back and read aloud. For the one who returned the music. Nobody said anything. Elena looked down at the sapphire ring resting against her finger. Her mother had never allowed anyone to remove it. Never allowed anyone to sell it. Never explained why. It's a sentimental inscription, Lawrence said. Hardly evidence of anything criminal. No, Adrian agreed quietly. It isn't. His thumb moved across the paper. Once, slowly, like a man touching a scar. Elena noticed the change before anyone else. It wasn't belief. It wasn't trust. It was recognition. My mother hated engraved gifts, Adrian said. The room turned toward him. She said people carved messages into jewelry when they couldn't say them out loud. Lawrence forced a smile. Then perhaps she changed her mind. Adrian's eyes lifted. She didn't. The words landed with unexpected weight. Nobody challenged him. He was the son. He would know. Or at least he should. Rain continued tapping softly against the windows. Somewhere in the estate, a door closed. Elena watched Adrian staring at the receipt. Not the engraving. The date. October 15th. 2 days before Isabella's death. 2 days before the missing property report. 2 days before everything supposedly fell apart. Then Adrian asked a question so quiet most people nearly missed it. Lawrence. The lawyer looked up. Yes. Adrian folded the receipt in half. If the ring was already reported missing on the 17th, why was my mother still paying to alter it on the 15th? Lawrence did not answer immediately. For the first time that night, the silence belonged to someone else. Rain slid down the dining room windows in thin silver lines. The chandelier hummed softly overhead. Somewhere beyond the kitchen doors, a dishwasher started another cycle, the low mechanical roar briefly filling the gap between heartbeats. Memory becomes unreliable after 15 years, Lawrence said at last. Dates are confused. Receipts are misplaced. Grief reshapes details. Adrian folded the receipt once more and slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket. Maybe. That was all he said. Then he stood. The meeting ended without announcement. People simply felt it ending. Chairs moved. Conversations restarted in cautious whispers. Lawrence recovered quickly, smiling, shaking hands, guiding guests towards safer subjects. Anyone watching casually would have thought the crisis had passed. Elena knew better. So did Adrian. An hour later, she sat alone in a staff break room beneath fluorescent lights that made everything look tired. Her untouched coffee had gone cold. The music box rested beside her elbow. Rain tapped against a narrow basement window near the ceiling. The estate felt different now. Quieter, like a house listening to itself. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She looked up. Adrian stood in the doorway. No bodyguards. No audience. Just a man in a dark suit who looked more exhausted than powerful. Miss Brooks.
Elena.
He nodded once.
Elena.
His gaze settled on the music box. You kept everything. My mother did. Most people would have sold the ring. Elena looked down at her hands. She needed money more than anyone I knew. The answer seemed to hold his attention. Then why didn't she? Elena took a slow breath. Because she said some things stop belonging to you when they become proof. Adrian said nothing. The refrigerator motor clicked on behind them. I don't want money, Elena added quietly. I don't want a settlement. I don't want a reward. What do you want? She met his eyes. I want my mother to stop being the liar in someone else's story. The room went still. Adrian looked away first. 30 minutes later, He was in a private office on the third floor of the estate. A single desk lamp illuminated stacks of old personnel records. His longtime attorney sat across from him. Not Lawrence. Someone else. Someone Lawrence had never controlled. Adrian slid the jewelry receipt across the desk. Pull every employment file connected to Clara Brooks. Going back how far? 15 years. Anything specific? Adrian thought about the warning written on the receipt. She isn't safe here. Everything. The search began quietly.
No announcements. No accusations.
Personnel files. Visitor logs. Archived invoices. Old security backups. The kind of records nobody expected anyone to revisit. Near midnight, Adrian received the first call. "We found Clara," his attorney said. Adrian stared out at the rain-dark gardens. And papers shuffled on the other end. She didn't disappear after Isabella died. Adrian's grip tightened slightly on the phone. "Keep talking." According to hospital records, she was admitted to St. Vincent's 3 hours after Isabella's death. Adrian went completely still. For what? Another pause. Multiple injuries. The office suddenly felt colder. Who signed the intake paperwork? More paper. More silence. Then the answer. Not family. Not police. Adrian closed his eyes. Who? Lawrence Voss. Adrian lowered the phone slowly. 15 years. 15 years of trusting the same man with every contract, every estate document, every family secret. On the desk beside him sat the photograph from the music box. His gaze drifted toward the small brass keycard in the corner of the image. For the first time, he wasn't wondering whether Elena was telling the truth. He was wondering how many times he had looked directly at the truth and chosen the wrong person instead. Adrian did nothing the next morning. At least nothing visible. That was what made it frightening. Lawrence arrived at the estate at exactly 8 a.m., as he had for years. The same black sedan. The same leather briefcase. The same confident stride through the front entrance. Nobody stopped him. Nobody questioned him. By 8:15, he was seated in the library reviewing contracts for the family foundation. By 8:20, he had no idea he was already walking into a trap. Elena stood in the service hallway outside the library holding a tray of untouched coffee cups. She wasn't supposed to be part of any meeting. That was precisely why Adrian wanted her there. Not to speak. To remember. "You said your mother noticed details," Adrian had told her before sunrise. "What details?" Elena adjusted her name tag. "Things people repeat without realizing it." Like, she thought for a moment. People lie about events. They don't lie well about habits. That answer had stayed with him. Now the library door remained slightly open. Inside, Lawrence sat across from Adrian at a long mahogany table. A sealed manila envelope rested between them. Unopened. A security camera in the corner displayed a small blinking green light. Lawrence noticed it immediately. "New equipment?" he asked casually. Adrian glanced up from a document. "Old equipment. We finally turned it back on." Lawrence smiled. "Good. You can never be too careful." Elena watched through the narrow gap in the doorway. She saw his hand tighten briefly around his coffee cup. Tiny thing. Easy to miss. Adrian didn't miss it. "I reviewed Clara Brooks's hospital records," Adrian said. The sentence landed softly. Lawrence set down his cup. "I expected you would. You signed the intake paperwork. Someone needed to. Why you?" Lawrence leaned back, perfectly calm. "Because Isabella trusted me. Not had trusted. Trusted. Present tense." Elena felt a strange chill crawl across her arms. Her mother had done the same thing when speaking about people she missed. She listened harder. Adrian slid a folder across the table. "Walk me through that night." Lawrence opened it. Hospital records. Visitor logs. Nothing surprising. "I've done that many times." "Do it again." Another pause. Lawrence began speaking. Smooth. Practiced. Clara arrived after midnight. Injured. Disoriented. Unable to provide reliable information. He had repeated the story so often it sounded effortless. Then Elena noticed it. Not what he said. What he didn't. She set the tray down quietly and stepped closer to the doorway. Inside, Lawrence continued. The emergency room was overcrowded. It took nearly 2 hours before she was admitted. Adrian remained expressionless. 2 hours. Approximately.
Elena frowned.
Her eyes drifted to the copy of the hospital report she had memorized the previous night. Arrival, 11:38 p.m. Admission. 12:07 a.m., 29 minutes. Not 2 hours. Her pulse quickened. She knocked once on the open door. Both men turned. Lawrence's expression hardened instantly. Miss Brooks. Elena ignored the warning hidden inside the greeting. The report says 29 minutes. Silence. Adrian looked at Lawrence. Lawrence looked at Elena. Hospital records aren't always accurate. It sounded reasonable, until Adrian opened the folder and removed another page. Interesting. His voice remained calm. Because that's exactly what you told investigators 15 years ago. Word for word. Lawrence didn't answer. Adrian slid a second document onto the table. A transcript. Old testimony. Same sentence. Same wording. Same explanation. Repeated perfectly after 15 years. Not memory. Rehearsal. Nobody moved. The camera light continued blinking softly in the corner. Green. 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 Then Lawrence's phone vibrated against the table. He glanced at the screen. Just once. But Elena saw the color leave his face. And for the first time since this began, he did not reach for the phone. Because he finally understood something Adrian had already known. The maid he had spent all night trying to dismiss was no longer standing outside the room. Lawrence did not touch the phone. The vibration stopped on its own. The screen went dark. For a moment nobody moved. Then Adrian stood. Library. 10 minutes. That was all he said. By the time everyone gathered, the storm had intensified outside. Rain hammered the tall windows of the Moretti estate. The same library that had once displayed family history now felt like a courtroom without a judge. The foundation board members had been called back. Vivian Moretti sat rigidly near the fireplace. The estate manager stood against the far wall. Lawrence remained at the long table, his expression carefully controlled. Elena entered last. She carried the silver music box in both hands. Not because it was heavy, because she understood now that it mattered. The room fell quiet when Adrian placed a small digital recorder on the table. Nobody had seen it before. Lawrence's eyes fixed on it immediately. What's that? Adrian ignored the question.
Elena.
She stepped forward. Her pulse hammered in her ears. 15 years of silence had led to this room. 15 years of people speaking for her mother. 15 years of official stories written by people with titles and signatures. She carefully opened the music box. The hidden compartment beneath the velvet lining was already exposed. From inside, she removed a tiny cassette adapter wrapped in yellowing tissue paper. My mother never let me throw it away, she said. She said if anyone ever asked about the ring, I should protect this first. Nobody interrupted. Adrian connected the device. The click sounded impossibly loud. Then static filled the room. A hiss, a crackle, a breath. Elena closed her eyes. She had heard the recording only once, late the previous night. Even then, it had felt like listening through a grave. Then a woman's voice emerged. Weak, frightened, unmistakably real. Isabella Moretti. The room froze. If you're hearing this, static swallowed part of the sentence. Then Clara was right. Nobody breathed. I don't know how much time I have. Another crackle. Lawrence says everything is under control. Across the table, Lawrence's face emptied. Not panic. Not yet. Something worse. Recognition. Isabella continued. But documents keep disappearing. Someone changed the foundation records. Adrian's hand tightened slowly against the edge of the table. If anything happens to me, the ring goes to Clara. The room seemed to shrink. She protected the originals. Vivian covered her mouth. Isabella's voice trembled. I trusted the wrong people because they looked respectable. Silence. Then the final blow. If Lawrence tells you Clara stole anything, he's lying. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Rain battered the glass. The recording continued for several seconds before ending in static. Adrian stared at the dark recorder. Not blinking. Not speaking. The color had drained from his face. Elena had never seen grief arrive so quietly. It wasn't anger. It wasn't outrage. It was a man realizing his mother had asked for help and he had spent 15 years trusting the person she feared. Lawrence finally found his voice. Audio can be manipulated. The words sounded weak even to him. Adrian looked up. Slowly. The hospital intake. Silence. The receipt. Silence. The photograph. Silence. The missing report. Silence. The recording. Nobody came to Lawrence's defense. Not this time. Elena reached into the music box one final time and removed a sealed envelope addressed in Isabella's handwriting. Lawrence visibly flinched. Tiny. Almost invisible. But everyone saw it. Adrian looked at the envelope. Then at Lawrence. For the first time all night, the lawyer looked away first. The room understood before a single verdict had been spoken. The story they had believed for 15 years was dying in front of them. Adrian carefully placed the recorder beside the envelope, folded his hands, and spoke in a voice so calm it felt colder than rage. Call my attorney. No one argued after that. Not because Adrian raised his voice. Not because security stepped forward. The fight simply left the room. Truth had a way of doing that. 3 weeks later, the official letters began arriving. The Moretti Foundation announced an independent investigation. Lawrence Voss resigned before the board could remove him. Then the board removed him anyway. His access to foundation records was revoked. His name disappeared from the organization's website. Auditors reopened 15 years of financial and legal filings. Several documents connected to Isabella's estate were referred for formal review. Men and women who had spent years agreeing with him suddenly claimed they had always had concerns. Elena learned that power rarely collapsed all at once. Cracked, then crumbled. The larger correction happened quietly. Clara Brooks's personnel file was restored. The original records were recovered from storage and entered into the official archive. The notation that implied theft vanished. The statement that she had abandoned her position was removed. In its place appeared the truth, trusted employee, witness, custodian of family property by direct instruction of Isabella Moretti. Elena stared at those words for a long time. Trusted employee. Her mother had died without hearing them. But they were there now.
Permanent.
Real. A week after that, a law firm hired by the foundation arranged to settle every outstanding medical debt connected to Clara's final years. Elena almost refused. Then she read the accompanying letter. Not compensation. Not charity. Restitution. The distinction mattered. Adrian understood that. The old hospital invoices that had followed her mother through years of fear and sacrifice were finally closed. Stamped paid in full. One rainy afternoon, Elena returned to the estate. Not through the service entrance. Through the front door. Nobody stopped her. Nobody asked who she was. The staff greeted her by name. Her actual name. Not sweetheart. Not honey. Not the maid.
Elena.
The difference hit harder than she expected. Adrian was waiting in the music room. The same room everyone had spent years describing incorrectly. Sunlight spilled across the black grand piano. The bench faced the door. Exactly where Isabella had kept it. The restored photograph stood in a silver frame nearby. Clara and Isabella together. No longer hidden in a box. No longer treated like a problem. Adrian stood beside the piano holding the sapphire ring. For a moment neither spoke. The board voted this morning, he said finally. The foundation archive will be renamed. Elena looked at him. After your mother? Adrian shook his head. After both of them. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. Adrian held out the ring. This belongs to you. Elena stared at the blue stone catching sunlight. For years she had protected it because she was afraid of losing the last piece of her mother. Now it felt different. Not fear. Legacy. You should keep it, she said softly. Adrian looked surprised. Why? Elena glanced toward the framed photograph. Because it never belonged to one person. Silence settled between them. Warm this time. Not dangerous. Just honest. Adrian nodded slowly. Then he opened the lid of the silver music box resting atop the piano. The old mechanism clicked. A familiar melody drifted into the room. The same box that had once hidden evidence now sat openly in the light. Nothing concealed. Nothing buried. This meaning had changed. So had hers. As she turned toward the door, Adrian spoke again. I spent 15 years trusting the wrong voice.
Elena paused.
A lot of people did. You didn't. She considered that, then smiled faintly. My mother taught me something. Adrian waited. Elena looked once more at the photograph, the piano, the music box, and the sunlight filling a room that no longer felt haunted. The truth doesn't get louder with time, she said. It just waits for someone willing to listen. Adrian said nothing after that. Neither did she. The music continued playing softly behind her as she walked through the front entrance, carrying nothing except her own name, and for the first time in a very long while, the world finally heard it.